Heather is asking, where do you see things like accessibility testing fitting into a DevOps setting?
That's a great question. So one thing I can relate immediately is that at Etsy, when we did internationalization, because Etsy was not internationalized and didn't even accept non-US currency when I started there. That was one of the big initiatives, was to accept all currencies and be available. And so internationalization for Etsy was like under 200 people, I think, at this point, small company. Obviously, we're not going to hire an internationalization team in every market because we're global. So, we did what anybody would do, just outsource, which means you have like a ton of content coming from all different content sources, and it all goes in the same place, and it all has to, talking about accessibility, like it has to make sense in the language, and it has to be, it has to respond correctly based on the metadata the browser is sending you, and all of that testing was done in CI. That was actually they came up with with like a mini markup language, like I guess what you still call a micro format, for marking up areas that were internationalized, and then those areas, were tested. And because it was a micro format, it was possible to test it. So, for instance, if you found an input field and it wasn't marked as internationalized, that you could just fail a test on that.
Right. Okay.
So that approach is workable for any aspect of accessibility up to a point. I think that one of the things that's really changed in the last 10 years with the massive availability of CPU and RAM that we have now through cloud services is that you can actually do a lot of visual accessibility testing. You can use OpenCV or any of the visual testing solutions that are out there now to like run all of the different filters that people use to manually test websites for accessibility. Like you can turn it grayscale, you can turn it low resolution, you can make the screen really small. You can do a lot of this stuff automatically now. So that's really that's really good. I think like it's great that you can do a lot of the stuff that used to just be, people used to be able to cry like too expensive for accessibility testing a lot, and it's just like it's a lot harder to do that now.
I was gonna ask you about that, because my experience has been on teams and organizations. They kind of want to do accessibility, but somehow it never goes high enough up the priority list to get it done. So whereas this might give people an opportunity to kind of just fold it into.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that, and it's something that's done quite a bit with performance testing, and equally doable with security testing, is to just to basically put a wrapper around your Selenium process so that all of the logs for what's going on in the browser go through a scanner that looks for known bad patterns. So, I mean, you can examine the rendered HTML of a web page and make judgments about whether it's accessible. For the kind of, so take an organization that's not doing any accessibility testing because it costs too much. Just adding that layer of like just the stuff that you can automatically detect. Like again, like you don't have even stuff as simple as like you don't have an alt tag, right? You don't have a description of enough alt tag on your image. I'm not going to try and recite all of the form inputs accessibility from memory, but a lot of that stuff is just straight up mechanically detectable. And I think this was true 10 years ago too, but it wasn't possible to just like put a corporate credit card into a cloud service and say like, well, this is a real slow, static analysis is slow. So it's just, you couldn't say like render the HTML of every page in Phantom.js or whatever, and then send it over here for static analysis, and then make a big, put it all in Bigtable, and let's trend it. Like 10 years ago that would have been really expensive and would actually taken like a DBA. Now you can just do it, and there are more and more services that would do it for you. I mean, like actually a lot of the log monitoring or like honeycomb, like they would basically work like that. If you had your browser logs and your Selenium logs, like you could just pump them in there. So all of this, I think, is important. Not to say like, yay, we can automate way more stuff now. In itself, what's important is that now it's, and I guess my point was like, now I think it's a lot more feasible for like a small to medium sized organization to have some accessibility testing, because you do get this automated layer in, even if it's not running in the build, even if it maybe just, if it runs like hourly or whatever, the tester can then start from that feedback and say, and I think that's where CI always, the most value in CI is to me, is that it's a place for the tester to come in and say, okay, I'm not going to waste time testing, this module. I will go test this other module, because that's how testing becomes like extremely expensive, is that the people who do testing just constantly feel like every time I test stuff, it's already broken. And when I ask people, they go like, oh yeah, I guess I broke that. So that's the point of automated. And that comes back to the feedback loops question. So that's the point of automated testing in the build, is that that's the first point of value to me, is that it means the testing team can come in, not have to communicate with anybody. They can keep their own schedule, and they can make decisions about, is it worth my time to do, complicated, careful, manual exploratory testing on this, or is it obviously broken in some way that I can just send it back and say like, hey, you need better testing on this, on your side.